Welcome, everyone. My name is Jamie Rosenberg. I'm the founder and CEO of ClassWallet, and ClassWallet is the sponsor of this session. What I'll do today, I'm just going to go through the agenda, is, let's see. I'd like to introduce first those speakers that are joining me. With me is Ryan Walters. Ryan is the Secretary of Education for the state of Oklahoma. And also is Matt Richardson. Matt is the Senior Vice President of Fax Management. And Matt will be able to explain more about what Fax does and who they serve as he contributes to the presentation. And the goal of the presentation today is to provide you some best practices that ClassWallet and this team has been able to see around the country in states' desire, both at the state and local level, to implement grant and scholarship programs. And we will give you the opportunity to share more detail about what Secretary Walters was able to accomplish in Oklahoma and give you a case study there, and then open up for Q&A. If you have any questions along the way that you'd like us to answer, please feel free to use the room chat, which is in your lower right corner. Just enter your question there, and we hope to reserve about 20 minutes or so at the end of the presentation to answer any questions. So just briefly about ClassWallet, we are a financial technology company. We serve exclusively the education vertical. We were founded in 2014, used by state and local education agencies across 20 states. Currently, we have about 50,000 families using the platform for scholarships and grants, about 175,000 teachers in 3,600 schools using it for federal, state, and local grants. We're processing this school year about $200 million in grants through our platform. Our mission is to provide our clients with the highest levels of oversight and control, eliminating paperwork and manual processes that typically are associated with accomplishing those goals. And then equally as important, providing parents and educators, but for this particular presentation, parents, with a nimble and efficient way to obtain educational goods and services, ultimately providing the maximum impact for our children and students. We have three products. Our Family Wallet product is used by state and local agencies to give money to parents to pay for tuition and education resources and services, and that will be what we're speaking about today. We also have a Teacher Wallet product, which is provided to teachers to buy supplies and materials and resources for their classrooms. And we also have a Maintenance Wallet product. So over the past couple years, ClassWallet has had the opportunity to work with 7 different states in implementing scholarship and grant programs. So Arizona being the largest, it's about $120 million ESA program. Idaho is going live now, $50 million grant program. Tuition is not part of that program. North Carolina is a small ESA program. Oklahoma, it was a combined, actually 2 programs, one for tuition and one for supplemental resources and services, which Secretary Ryan and Matt will all be able to elaborate on that use, on that case study. We're currently in negotiations with another state, which will close probably by the end of this calendar year for a $30 million program. We also worked with leadership in Tennessee and South Carolina to operationalize their ESA programs. Neither one of them are live due to legal challenges facing them. So over the course of implementing all of these programs, we really got to see firsthand a lot of the processes and policies in place, and then we felt were able to share with new clients as we were approached for advice or for our services, and really help them be successful based upon what we've seen in other states, based upon mistakes of no one's fault that have happened before. And the purpose of this program is really share those insights with you. So what was very, very apparent is, when we were to get in contact or connect with leadership, there was always, very noteworthy goals in place, sort of blue skies ideas of how to make the biggest impact with this money. And then as we would continue those conversations and we would discuss, logistics and costs, there was often a disconnect between what we want to do and what actually is practically doable. For example, we were speaking with one state where they wanted to give away money if parents needed certain money for reading, and maybe other parents needed money to help their students with math. And when it really came down to taking a deeper dive of how they would foresee implementing that and giving monies in a way and ensuring those parents were literally using those monies as intended, there was sort of a collective shrug that no one really had thought about that. And what we found were a lot of programs were stagnating, and unfortunately a lot of funds never got operationalized because there was grand ideas that were not necessarily married with logistics and costs. And so one word of wisdom that we would, if we had the opportunity to connect with policy advisors or legislators early enough in the process, would be to think about those logistics, think about the costs, think about the resources that are available or not available in conjunction with the program ideals and program goals, and ideally to try to find that sweet spot. And there's just a lot of logistics to think about that often don't get thought about in those sort of early days of when the grant and the program is designed. Qualifying families, determining the need. We spoke to one state that that because they weren't going to qualify families by income, they were just going to do a form, for example, like a Google form. And a simple question of how do you ensure that those families are actually residents of your states was a question or a factor they never even actually considered. So determining needs, and then as you determine needs, parents need to upload paperwork. They need to be followed up with if the application's incomplete. They're calling someone needs to answer that phones. So there's a lot of logistics simply about identifying who are the families that qualify for this grant. And with that, I'll introduce Matt from Fax Management, who's had over 20 years experience in the space and can share some of the insights and experiences that he's had in some of the things you should be thinking about as you're thinking about programs in your jurisdictions.
Well, Jamie, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to be here with you. I'm pleased to be representing Fax, and I was pleased to be part of the team that Jamie brought in to talk today, but also part of the team that Jamie brought together to serve clients in this space. And just to give you a little background on what brought us into the end-to-end solution that Jamie's put together. Fax is a company based in Lincoln, Nebraska. We have a long history of service to both mainly private schools and more recently public schools throughout the country. Through our services, we actually interact with over 3 million students a year, and those students are attending over 14,000 schools. So we brought a lot of background experience and resources to this project. And prior to working with the scholarship SGO program that we're talking about today, we have a long history with private scholarship organizations and also state tax credit organizations. We work with over 80 of those around the country. And through conversation and interaction with organizations over the past few years, we've become aware and we're made aware of situations where scholarship organizations did so much work, built a program infrastructure, raised funds, were ready to go, and perhaps the application process, the verification process became the weak link. And not through anyone's fault, but just the nature of the challenge of that process. And through our financial aid products and service that was already in place, we have been able to come in and develop very customized solutions to really fill a void, if you will, and fit the needs that are out there, both past and present, to help make sure that a program that launches is done so with a very a solid application process and a very good support system. So we've taken, as I said, what we've built, and we put it together in a way that we can really focus on some of the key things that we know are required to be successful in the front end of a process to get the application started, to get the families to apply, to make sure that they're qualified or not, and then have clean data available for exciting programs like the ESA programs that we're talking about today. And as an organization, the keys to our success and how we bring success to our clients is probably first and foremost through customer service and interaction with parents. We have a very robust support team. Depending on the size of the program, we can bring over 100 of our parent applicant support team members together to provide voice support, a voice on the phone based in Lincoln, Nebraska. We provide text support. We provide live chat support on applications. And we really work to make sure that once we build an application, a custom application for a client, we're then fully prepared and trained to support that. Our company's mission is to make educational dreams a reality for students. And we know if there's a missed connection with a family early on in the process, and that family's not fully committed or fully understanding of this application and this scholarship opportunity, we could lose that family. And really that's our focus day in and day out, is making sure that the families that we work with in a scholarship program are treated properly, are given access to the support they need, and then we bring them through that process. In a program like an ESA and in many of the programs that we work with in this space, we're dealing with an income qualifier. So we'll structure the application and the data collection and the documentation collection to make sure that we certify and verify that each family meets the required income thresholds for a program. In some cases, we'll also have a need component, which is a function of a financial aid need analysis. We can do both in a hybrid model, or we can simply do that income verification. Once we've done that, we'll have that data ready for review, and then it's prepared. And in the case of the program we're talking about now, ClassWallet and our client have a very solid, defined, audit-ready group of applicants who are now ready to receive an ESA scholarship. So we do a lot of that heavy lifting and work behind the scenes. The work that we're a scholarship organization, to take it on can often become a drag, a real cost challenge to maintain or to build and maintain over time. And we're comfortable and have found an opportunity to serve scholarship organizations and programs through our strength, which is taking the work that we already do, bringing that expertise online, and making sure that there's no more concerns and there's a good front end process. Recently, we had a program that we launched with an ESA for Jamie that had over 12,000 applicants in the first day. And within just over 10 days, we had close to 50,000 students in the system. And I bring that up because first of all, it's going to be a great opportunity for many students to receive ESAs, but also it's a testament to what we've done, frankly, and I'll brag on that if I can, because the system performed very well. And there's always risk with a large program of issues, problems around the launch of an application that's not really vetted, that's not perhaps not where it should be. And that's a big part of what we do behind the scenes, is make sure that the applications are steady and ready to go. In Oklahoma, we were privileged to work in a very unique program where we've provided an application that allows a family, depending on their school type, to, and Ryan certainly will speak to this here, but allows a family to apply either to a private school tuition voucher or an ESA for materials or equipment, or both, depending on that family's status. And in conjunction with the leadership that Ryan and his team brought to the program, and certainly Jamie and his group, we were able to do this through a single application to build an easy process for the families and make them successful in whichever direction they needed to go. So we're pleased to be here for anyone who needs additional information about what we do on the front end. We'll certainly be here to provide that. And ultimately, we're here to help learn and build custom solutions for ESA programs, scholarship programs. And Jamie, with that, I appreciate the chance to answer questions as we move forward.
Thanks so much. You know, even in the application process, the little nuances of where the rubber hits the road. For example, you want to qualify family by income, you just assume tax return. But what if the family doesn't submit a tax return? You know, those little things that that just have to be thought through. You know, really to that very, very last mile. And of course, you are communicating to families whether they've been awarded or not. A lot of families want to appeal that. They want, you know, they will respond, why did I get rejected? Someone's got to be on the other line to answer that phone, to reply to that email. There's just a lot of heavy lifting that generally is not in the core competency of the government agencies. That when you get ahead of it, you can create a very successful program. But if you're behind it and it's very reactive, generally unfortunately, a lot of friction can arise, and a lot of discontent can arise. And thinking about all of those aspects is critically important. Not to mention how the money gets to families. You know, previously in other programs, debit cards have been used. They're obviously very vulnerable to fraud, not to mention a massive amount of work to try to collect receipts and get an audit trail for them. Tremendous challenges, and we haven't really seen debit cards being used anymore. Reimbursements has their own challenges, as a lot of families can't afford to go out of pocket. You know, any amount of money, any amount of time, number one. Number two, if you're avoiding cutting checks, you've got to think about ACH, and a lot of these families might not have bank accounts. I mean, every little nuance, every little aspect of what could possibly go wrong or what could possibly be broken in the process are things that we found that when we come to the table early enough and we can enlighten the policymakers early enough in the process, they can begin to think about, is this really attainable today? And of course, we all are very sensitive to preventing fraud. And even simple things, we want this money to help these families pay for tutors and therapists. How do you ensure they're really a tutor? How do you ensure they're really a therapist? And they're not just paying their cousin who says they're a tutor or therapist. I mean, those factors are incredibly important to think about. And it just takes one bad apple, one story to reach the front page of the newspaper, and it sours the entire program, even though the whole program is probably being run very, very well. So these are the types of things, thinking about early enough is what we found to be very instrumental in a lot of these programs ultimately going live. The programs that we listed earlier in the presentation were not necessarily programs that kind of went live and then reached out for vendors and tried to pick one. We were there in the beginning, as Secretary Walters can attest, and advising the policymakers early on so that by the time the program went to key decision makers, they had all the answers. They were not caught flat-footed, because there's always going to be someone that's going to try to poke a hole in it. And if the naysayers, the opposition, can grab hold of any opportunity where they think this could be subject to fraud or where this could fall down, you've really minimized your chances. So what I'd like to do is segue into the case study in Oklahoma, which was exactly that. I'll just set it up here, and then I'll turn it over to Secretary Walters. But the Secretary and myself connected very, very early on. There was, very noble goals of taking CARES Act and GEARS Act money to fund families adversely impacted by COVID. Much needed. The need is tremendous and still is a lot unmet. And there was a lot of challenges. How to determine which families qualified, how to prevent fraud. As Ryan will speak to, we want them to get tutors and therapy, but how do we make sure the therapists are really who they say they are? Little things like that. Limited resources, limited human capital, limited experience, and limited time. Big goals, lots of challenges. I'll turn it over to Secretary Walters to kind of enlighten the audience of what your experience was from the beginning right on to ultimately getting that money out to the families.
Yeah, I'm kind of chuckling here because I just feel like I went back in time there to our first conversation, which was, we had a goal here to utilize GEAR funds to ensure that families that were most impacted by COVID had the ability and flexibility to address those challenges directly. So that was, the goal was, we identified, we've got students in private schools that want to stay in those private schools, but have experienced job loss. Their parents have a dramatic income loss or job loss. We then also looked at low-income families. Again, when you went to full digital and virtual learning, if you didn't have a device, if you needed, extra help or tutoring or extra materials, if you're low income, that was going to be really difficult for you. So we thought that low income students would be the most impacted, and we thought that private school families that were already low income and experienced a loss of income, that in all of the issues with COVID, we would hate for that student to be removed from the teacher and the school that they've been in for years. And so, we got to, we reach out, we get connected with Jamie. And again, the conversation he just had was very similar to our first one. We come with the goal, we want to get money to these families and we want to have maximized flexibility. And then again, we start walking through it. And again, Jamie starts with those questions. Okay, well, how many people do you have to administer the program? Okay, well, we don't have very many, like almost a very, very limited amount of people. Well, how are you going to ensure that the money is used in the way that you want it to be used? And again, to Jamie's point, we were very concerned that, we have a great opportunity here to show what happens when you give families and students direct access to the materials and to funding so that they can utilize them in the best way that suits their individual needs. We wanted this to go really well. Of course, we didn't want that bad example of, a family going out and buying, something that's not educational related at all. And so the beauty of this for us was we were able, and then the other question is, well, we said we wanted low-income families. We said we wanted families impacted by COVID in private schools. Well, how in the world do you identify all these people? And who's going to do those things? Again, we didn't have the government agency personnel with the background experience to do this. And quite frankly, we felt like there could be a more efficient way to do this outside of our government agencies. And so that's where we looked to ClassWallet, and we looked to facts, and we had this discussion, which was, okay, tell us what you want. Okay, we want families under 185% federal poverty line that are in a private school. Okay, what do you want them to do with the money? We want them to use it towards tuition. Okay. They then were able to create an application process. And again, I'm a little redundant here, but just to show you how difficult this was from a perspective of working in the governor's office and trying to make sure that this is done as effectively and as appropriately as possible. Well, how do you make sure that these applicants are who they say they are? How do you make sure that they're providing proper evidence? And how do you have the human capital to do all these things? So we had an application process through ClassWallet, through fax, and so that families were able to apply. They were able to go to a link. They were able to actually talk to somebody on the phone. They were able to upload all of their information and then apply for the programs. Now, by the way, there were 2 programs. There was one for scholarships, and then there was one for we called it a grant, but it was $1,500 for families to use on a litany of items. Again, initially, I'm thinking I want families to have as much flexibility as possible with this money, right? Well, yes and no. I want them to have flexibility to purchase educational items that will help them in their academic career, but I don't want them buying, something completely unrelated. With the pre-approved vendor list that ClassWallet used, I could go in and choose. Hey, they can purchase things here, and here. These receipts. Again, what about the back reporting? Again, if this was something that we did completely, who would handle all of the back reporting? Who would check all of these things? Again, with the process through ClassWallet, it's all embedded in the system. So we knew that we were able to, number one, ensure that the people getting the money were actually the people who were supposed to get the money. Number 2, we ensured that these funds, which are finite, right? And this is all what we're dealing with. We only have so much money, but they're going to be used on appropriate materials for these young people during this crisis. And so what we were able to experience is the ability for families, and again, thanks to these 2 right here, they did all the heavy lifting here, but we can have a family go on to one application, apply to one or both programs, navigate all of that without us utilizing all of this manpower and human capital in order to do that. And we've had it's been a tremendous success here in Oklahoma. We've been able to get the word out across the state. We've been able to have this streamlined application process. And again, we've been able to prevent fraud, to protect this mechanism. And for us, we feel like this has been a great success for our families. We feel like we were able to identify those who truly needed it. We were able to ensure that the money was being spent in a way that was effective. And because of that, we were able to ensure that these families got these funds that they so desperately needed in the middle of a pandemic. So that's, again, we can talk more about our story. I know that we're going to have time for question and answers, but we put $10 million towards scholarships for those students. Then we put $8 million towards, again, we called it a grant that could be used on, a device. It could be used on online tutoring. It could be used on any kind of supplemental materials that were education related. So we felt like a tremendous, we kept using the phrase bang for our buck. How do we ensure this money gets as close to the student as possible? And this was absolutely for us the best way to do that.
And thank you, Secretary. And sort of the message as we were communicating along the way was you're sort of starting out with, I want to go for the home run. I want to make the biggest impact. I want to maximize the most amount of flexibility. And as we started drilling down the questions, as the Secretary mentioned, okay, you want to give the money for therapists. Do you have resources, human or financial capital, to ensure the therapists really are therapists? No. You want to give money for tutoring, and do we have that capital? No. And so what we wanted to avoid was sort of going for the home run and then ultimately striking out and none of the money reaching the families. And what was the sort of end result was a consensus that getting on base was a real win, to be able to prove and show that we can get money to families efficiently, have them access it by resources, critical resources, maybe not everything under the sun, because as you try to go for everything under the sun, it gets incredibly costly, lots of opportunities for fraud, that we keep it not too narrow, but a little bit more narrow. And Oklahoma got on base, and the program has been incredibly, incredibly successful. And I should note, without any human capital needed from the agency department. They literally were able to deploy $18 million without having to engage any human capital from the government agency, and for it to be almost hands-free, and almost incredibly streamlined. So what we were able to do with Oklahoma and really the other states, Idaho and another state coming on board as well, we were able to come to the agency as a single contractor, streamline procurement, and the facts as the application management piece can come in as a subcontractor, so it streamlines everything. And it's a complete end-to-end solution. So application management, we're capturing all the data, getting all the documents, following up with every parent to make sure they complete the applications, answering all the questions, communicating with them, qualifying them. As the secretary mentioned, the state articulates what the qualification is, they give it to fax, and fax can match the application data with the logarithm and literally qualify or disqualify families, and communicate all of that. Get the funds to the family via virtual wallets and provide completely paperless, automated audit reporting of every transaction. ClassWallet's a walled garden, so the client can literally pick which vendors they are, can curate what is eligible. I always use the example, it's hard to defraud the state, for example, on scholastic.com, right? So they're able to give them a large selection of educational vendors to buy supplemental resources, services, devices. We actually, with the Oklahoma opportunity, integrated the country's largest online tutoring company, so they can actually get virtual tutoring through ClassWallet. So a complete walled garden, so it's totally safe, and they get a paper trail of every transaction. And we were able to operationalize both those programs, tuition scholarships and grants, in about 4 to 5 weeks. So it's just an example of two things. One, giving a lot of credit to the secretary and the governor's office and their nimbleness of being able to understand we have an impact. We want to get this money to the families. We understand some logistical challenges. Let's modify impact, and ultimately this amount of impact is much better than having no impact. And it's been a very, very successful program. So with that, I'm going to just take this opportunity to show the attendees how the product works, and then we can open it up for any questions. So I'm just going to.
Parents receive their scholarship funds in a ClassWallet account and have real-time view of their scholarship balance. Parents can pay school tuition or a service provider by clicking here. Listed are all the schools and service providers approved by the administration that are eligible to be a payee in the program. The parent clicks on who she wants to pay, uploads all supporting documentation for that particular payment, types in the amount to pay, selects an expense category if the administration requires, can provide annotation comments, and completes the ACH payment. Schools and service providers can access their ClassWallet account and view a detailed payment report of all the payments they have received on behalf of which student, by date, and amount. Parents can buy resources for their child by entering the shopping section and selecting from one of over 40 vendors that have integrated with ClassWallet. The parent selects a store builds a cart, and checks out of the store. The store sends the cart data back into the ClassWallet platform, and the parent is able to check out of ClassWallet using the scholarship grant. If the administration requires, ClassWallet can be configured to require the parent to select an expense category. The administrator gets real-time tracking of all parent activity. The administrator can access a series of reports and view item by item every purchase made by the parent. Here, the administrator can see line item detail of what this parent bought from that particular vendor, the tuition payment that the parent made, with all the backup paperwork digitized and reconciled automatically. If the administration wants to configure ClassWallet for pre-approval of purchases, ClassWallet has that capability as well. The administrator simply logs in, searches the pre-approval queue, can look at each item the parent is purchasing, and determine whether it is compliant or not. If it's compliant, the administrator can approve the order, or if there are items that are outside the scope of the program, they can reject it.
So that concludes the main part of the presentation. If there are any questions, we can open it up. You can simply ask them in the chat. So we got one question here from Tony Lewis. To expand the marketplace, can vendors apply to become qualified? Related, can parents request a vendor payment that has not been qualified as a one-off? So the answer is yes. We have set up that process for several states. Where vendors, I categorize the vendors in two parts. E-commerce vendors can apply. We can put them through an approval workflow for the state administrator to say yes or no, and then they will contact ClassWallet, and we have many ways for the e-commerce vendor to integrate. Service providers like tutors and therapists, childcare, or any others that would receive is not necessarily good, but could be paid via ACH, also could sign in, go through an approval workflow, and then if approved by the administrator, literally can link their bank account to ClassWallet and become part of that closed loop walled garden payment system. And then any sort of one-offs, we accommodate that. We always warn the client that once you give an inch, they want a mile, but we have many different variations of how we can accommodate any need. For example, I don't like to advertise it, we even have a concierge service. If there's a family located so remote of income of such that no other option would be viable, we literally will go out of our way to purchase that good or service on behalf of that family, with our own measures. So lots of opportunities to expand it, curate it, customize it to your local market. Often driving those dollars to local vendors if that was something important to you. As we're getting other questions, I wanted to ask, Matt, one thing that I think sometimes comes up as a preconceived assumption is, qualifying families using, Title I, free and reduced lunch data. And do you want to sort of react to that, as we've come across states who sort of enter the process thinking they can qualify families simply by going to a database they might have, but then ultimately understanding why that might be challenging?
Sure, Jamie, thanks. And that is a common go-to, that potentially is information that a state may have in-house. And as we look into that, a couple things come to the surface. One, it's difficult to say that information is correct for all families. In other words, we might have students in a school the families choose not to apply for free and reduced lunch for a variety of reasons. However, they would be qualified. So those families are now not on that database list and would further be excluded from an opportunity based on their choice to not participate in free and reduced lunch. So through an application verification process that's purpose-built and applied to the program, that family can participate and be captured in a way that is not having them directly interact with the school that might be an intimidation to them that prevented them from being part of free and reduced lunch. And the other is just the liability of trying to manage data, manage internal data integrity in terms of, what years are we using from free and reduced lunch, and are we able to truly match that to each of the students involved. So when you bring that all the way around, it ultimately gets back to, the people power involved and required to do that internally versus us being able to do that in a clean environment in a new application process.
Secretary Walters, has it been useful or potentially could be useful to be able to have a case study of success that might further other objectives as in your tenure as secretary?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, that was, our concern as we were talking through how these programs would function was there's a real potential here to show the benefit of getting money to families and directly to students and giving them flexibility with those funds. Again, we wanted, Jamie described it well there to, there's a sweet spot. I mean, we had several discussions about this, how broad do you want to go? Because initially, like I said, my initial thought was, hey, well, let's get the money to families and let them make the decision. And then as we kind of think through that, how quickly, again, a few bad stories and a few misappropriation of money here. And again, that's not what we wanted. And we wanted the program to be successful as we continue to look into the future on how we fund education and how we have programs available for these students. And again, in contacting families, there's such a diversity of need. You have some families that have English as students with English as second language. You have some families whose student struggles in third grade reading. You have some that struggle in fifth grade math. And if you don't give some flexibility, you're not meeting them where they are, and the benefit goes out the window. So, for us, we thought we've got to make sure that this is done correctly for the students. Number one, we had to help students in COVID. But then number two, for the long term, again, we wanted these programs to be successful to show how empowering it can be to engage families directly through funds and to give them this type of flexibility with how they use it. And so, yeah, we have seen tremendous success. Again, across the aisle, we've had politicians on both sides that were very happy with the program, have spoken out about the benefits of it. And so we've been very, very happy about the successes that we've had with it. We've been very happy to hear back from all the awardees. And, this is something that we feel like is the beginning of something here. And so that was part of the thought process for us too, is how do we continue to make sure that these families that even after COVID, your low income families are going to be families that are going to need help. And again, the closer we get to ensuring that our funds are getting directly to that student, the more efficiently we fund education. So we are very, very pleased with the program. We're very, very pleased with the success of it. And I want to mention one other thing. Jamie mentioned this. Again, for us, we did not have the personnel. I mean, we just did not have the personnel on the back end to do all of these things that we've talked about, to have these checks in place. So for us, if we didn't have, if we didn't utilize these vendors in the way that we did, there was just really no way to do this and mitigate fraud and ensure that the applicants are who they say they are. There was just, we just functionally couldn't do it, especially in the time that we did it. But even with more time, that would have been a tremendous barrier for us to overcome in trying to launch a program like this.
These programs come in various shapes and sizes. We obviously work with Arizona, which has, I think, maximum amount of flexibility awarded to the families. And ClassWallet is configured in lots of different ways for those families to take advantage of not just the marketplace, not just the vendor pay, but they have reimbursement. They have other tools potentially available to them. So maximum flexibility. and then there's the programs in between. North Carolina is in between, and Oklahoma is described here. So, what we have found is that when the program goes live, there's a lot of value in expectation management. And if this is what the families understand how the grants can be used, then they're able to really meet most of their needs. They're not necessarily trying to find something that they can't meet. Ryan did not have human capital in place to do a pre-approval workflow. Other states do, and therefore they make Amazon available because they can review the order first to make sure it's compliant. And certainly from Amazon, you can buy, meet many, many needs. So I just want to emphasize that. We do have a question from Jennifer Irwin. Have other states have positive results using ClassWallet? I don't know if I'm going to be the most objective person to answer that question, but I would like to say that we've provided a lot of value to our clients. We've never lost a client. We really have 100% renewal, and I can say with pleasure and pride that I think we really do solve a big problem for the states and for the families. As Ryan mentioned, it's so hard to operationalize this. And we have heard, as you might have heard, so millions and millions of dollars being returned and unused because they simply cannot be figured out how to operationalize it. And so it does bring us a lot of pleasure to be able to come in and really deliver a solution quickly, efficiently, solve the problem, as the secretaries mentioned, and other states have different variations of problems, and ultimately get those dollars in the hands of students. So subjectively, I think we do have a lot of happy clients.
Well, and I will say, Jamie, we reached out to Arizona and North Carolina, and again, I would, advise, you all to do the same. You'll do due diligence on using somebody. And we got really great feedback from them who had used ClassWallet before. So that was kind of our steps. Was we began kind of doing our due diligence to see their background. And so I will just say, I know Jamie doesn't really want to just brag on himself there, but we reached out to at least those two states that gave us great feedback.
There's a question for you, Secretary, from Tony Lewis. Do you see your state moving forward? Oops, I got bumped up. Do you see state moving forward toward an ongoing state-funded program after using CARES Act dollars to set this program up, if I understand it correctly?
Yeah, that's what we're looking at. That's what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is to keep our Bridge the Gap program that awards these students directly this money. We would love to see that continue. That's something that we're going to be pursuing moving forward. But we absolutely hope that that's in the cards. This was part of the reason we really wanted to ensure, like I said, the first thing was to make sure that the students got what they needed during a pandemic. But we did also hope, if the program was successful, we believe in empowering parents and empowering students. So that's absolutely something that we're going to be pursuing here. And again, with a successful launch here, we're positive about the potential of that moving forward.
So it's been about 15 minutes. Any other questions? Well, you can certainly find us through the platform here on the foundation setup. Feel free to reach out, and I thank all of you for participating and listening. I hope it's been helpful, and if we can be helpful in any way moving forward, obviously, it should be easy to find us. So thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your conference and the rest of your day.